The last time I saw my friend Alex, he was white as a sheet, eyes wide with fear as he whispered to me, "I think I just made a huge mistake." I defound him in his apartment with all of the lights turned off, except for a single candle casting long shadows on the walls. Usually when he called me in a panic, it was because something had happened with one of his girls. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the only furniture he had was a threadbare sofa, a TV, and a battered wooden table littered with books and papers. When he wasn't home, I liked to visit his place. It was nice to sit in silence and reflect amidst the clutter of his many interests. Alex sighed dramatically and flopped down on the sofa next to me. He told me that he'd been trying to contact the spirit of a woman who died in the apartment building decades ago. Apparently, she died under mysterious circumstances, and rumors swirled that she'd been a witch. We'd been friends since childhood, and although we'd gone our separate ways after school, he was one of the few people I could still be completely myself around. To find out what happened to her, he replied with a shrug. It spoke of a young woman who lived in the apartment above Alex's in the early 1940s. I looked at Alex, who shrugged helplessly. Suddenly, the planchette began moving across the board. I jumped back in surprise as it spelled out its first message. Her name was Eleanor Westcott, and she was rumored to have been involved in witchcraft. Alex swallowed nervously and replied, "I'm sorry, but I need your help. I want to know what happened to you." The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Alex and I stared at the spot where the planchette had been, but it was nowhere to be seen. Before it's too late. Panic flashed across Alex's face. "What do you mean?" he whispered. The planchette spun wildly across the board, knocking over a candle and plunging us into total darkness. His apartment was empty when I got there, his things still sitting on the table, and the circles still drawn on the floor. But another part of me couldn't help but wonder if Eleanor had something to do with his disappearance. Was he foolish enough to try summoning her spirit in his apartment? Or did she come for him in the middle of the night, taking him to join her in whatever dark place she came from? It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. I knew better than to make fun of things he was serious about. And he was clearly nervous, so I tried to support him. Adrenaline surged through me, and I scrambled to get away from the coffee table where I'd been sitting. Maybe he's out there somewhere, trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead forevermore. They were pointing at something on the ground, and I couldn't help but sneak a peek. Police believed it was a tragic accident, but rumors persisted that she'd been a victim of foul play. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to her, but her death remains one of the biggest mysteries in the city's history. There was a chalk circle drawn on the pavement, identical to the one Alex had drawn in his apartment, and in the middle of it lay a young woman's body. Alex was on his feet yelling, "Eleanor, stop this. I didn't mean to upset you." I stumbled out of his apartment and onto the street, desperate to get some fresh air. According to the story, she was found dead in her apartment one day, but there were no signs of foul play, and no one ever found out how she died. Some said she'd been a victim of her own magic, while others believed she'd been killed by jealous neighbors. I mean, if that's what the rumors say, then she died here, so it makes sense, right? Plus, I thought it would be cool. But his voice was different that day, tight with tension. So I dropped what I was doing and rushed over. He decided to try contacting her spirit using the instructions in the book. That's why he'd drawn the circle on the floor. It was supposed to act as a barrier between the spirit world and our own, a way to keep whatever he might have unleashed trapped inside. It will answer you. I took the planchette, placed it on the board, and tried not to think about how ridiculous this was going to look if the ghost of a witch materialized in our living room. He looked different somehow, older, and there was a strange new smell in the air, like mildew in old books. But the strangest thing was the circle drawn on the floor with chalk. But now, he was 27 years old, and instead of pretending to be scared while hiding behind the blanket, he was researching ghosts and other paranormal things in earnest. At the time, I knew very little about his research. He told me he was interested in folklore and local legends, and I let it go at that. Not thinking much more about it until I walked into his apartment and saw that circle on the floor. Alex didn't usually get into this kind of thing. Alex remained standing hesitantly in the doorway, and I could tell by the wild look in his eye that he didn't want me to ask any more questions. Then he shut the door and turned off the lights, leaving us in total darkness. A few weeks before that, I had gotten a call from Alex asking me to meet him at his apartment immediately. Alex lived alone in a small apartment in an old building in the city center. Alex had always been fascinated by the occult, and throughout our childhood, we read ghost stories and watched horror movies together. "What is that?" I asked, stepping over it to sit on the sofa. After a few minutes of awkward silence, I said, "Come on, man, spill it. What are you up to?" "Why would you want to do that?" I asked, genuinely confused. He showed me the book he'd been reading, which was filled with local legends. Alex had become intrigued and wanted to know the truth. I stared at the circle, suddenly feeling very uncomfortable. Despite being skeptical about most things paranormal, I didn't want to question Alex's beliefs. "So what now?" I asked. Alex took a deep breath and handed me an old, battered Ouija board. "Ask whatever you want," he said. "Hello," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to say. "Why are you here?" The voice coming from the board was raspy and cold, like fingernails dragging down a chalkboard. The planchette moved again, faster this time. "Leave. Now." When I regained my senses, I realized that the circle on the floor was gone. Then the lights flickered back on. "I don't feel so good," I said, suddenly lightheaded. Alex nodded dumbly, still staring at the floor. As I stood there catching my breath, I noticed a crowd of people gathered in front of the apartment building across the street. The news reported that the woman's name was Eleanor Reston and that she'd fallen from her apartment window. I never saw Alex again after that day. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Some part of me hopes that he's out there somewhere, that he simply decided to start a new life under a new identity. I often think about Alex and wonder what happened to him. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more content and check out these other videos from our channel.